My brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. And to my brothers of other faiths, may the peace and blessings of God be with you all. This session would be prevention of violent extremism. And before I get into that, we have the UN Resident Coordinator with us, Mr. Richard Blewett, and I will ask him to bring greetings from the UN.
Okay, very good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for inviting me to be here today. Salam alaikum. So I spent 3 very happy years in Sudan, in East Africa. At the beginning of my career, I was a teacher in Sudan, and then I worked for an NGO in Sudan. So anyhow, that's not particularly relevant to the discussion, but so I just wanted to welcome you. It's fantastic to see the solidarity across the Caribbean, and that all of you have come here to the wonderful Trinidad and Tobago. And I'm sure you're having great hospitality, enjoying the food, and I'm sure sharing experiences and perspectives. From the UN's perspective, you know, I'm sure, about this new global agenda, the 2030 agenda, the Sustainable Development Goals. Goal number 17 is all about partnerships. You know, we cannot sit in our silos. We have to find ways of reaching out and working better together. So, you know, I think this meeting is all about that agenda. How do we build partnerships and work well together? Clearly, there's a challenge in the Caribbean linked to education. You know, the education systems of the Caribbean fail too many young, particularly young men. That's true in other countries in the world, but it's certainly true here in the Caribbean. Here in Trinidad, we still have a poverty problem. We have a relatively high level of poverty. We have maybe a fifth of the population living in poverty, which, given the wealth of the country, really shouldn't happen. There shouldn't be that level of poverty. And then I just look forward to the discussion this evening and to see how the UN can play any constructive role in supporting the community in addressing the issues of violent extremism. We work heavily in the Caribbean on citizen security. We launched a report in 2012 on citizen security in the Caribbean, and that highlighted a lot of very difficult issues. It was written by academics from the universities of the West Indies. It highlighted the problem of prisons. It highlighted the problems of delayed justice. It highlighted the problems of the education system and its weaknesses. It highlighted the issues of poverty. So many challenges, corruption in the police service, and the list goes on and on. And unless you address all of those issues, you can't bring citizen security. You can't resolve the issues of the gangs in Trinidad or in other parts of the Caribbean. So how do we move that citizen security agenda out of academia and into policy making is one of our challenges that we work on here. So, very good evening.
Thank you, Richard. I think Richard just answered all our questions. What is prevention? How do we prevent violent extremism? And he identified all the elements that cause violent extremism. So let me just introduce you to our panel this evening. I have on my immediate right Brother Mtima Salwazi, and he did do a presentation previously, so should we all be familiar with him. I have my brother Dalip, Andrew Dalip. He is a senior advisor to the Attorney General, and he has blessed us with his presence to give us his knowledge, which we would see that how relevant that is in terms of us as Muslims when he touches on the areas that he has expertise on. And then we have Dr. Dawood Abdullah, and I'm sure all of us have listened to him during the course of the last 2 days, and he would also give us his perspective on violent extremism and the prevention of same. So, Prevention of violent extremism, or PV as the term is now used in several quarters. And one would ask in a Muslim environment, is this something devised by the West to work on the psyche of the Muslims? The obvious question that most of us would ask. Consider for a moment the following. Last week, a 13-year-old boy's throat was slit, and the same was done to a 57-year-old woman who was supervising him. I am sure we all read or heard about that. One boy or girl stabs another boy or girl in school. We are all too familiar with that scene also. A man starts shooting at Republican congressmen practicing baseball in preparation for their annual match against the Democratic colleagues. I'm sure we heard about that also. Can we consider these acts as violent extremes? Don't we all have differences of opinion with others from time to time? Don't we all face difficulties in our lives, be it financial, injustice, religious, or employment? We may even think about violent solutions, but do we do it? Or do we restrain ourselves? The persons in the three situations above did resort to violence. So the question is, why did they do what they did? Why did they choose the violent method as a solution? And was it in fact a solution? Or did it compound the situation, the problem that they had? In Trinidad, we have had over 400 killings every year for the last 3 years. We have had numerous reported incidents of domestic violence, and school violence is a perennial problem. Why are more and more persons seeing violence as a solution to issues rather than dialogue and or litigation? This is in essence what we would be dealing with in this session. However, I would like to add that the CARICOM impacts, the arm of CARICOM that deal with security, would be finalizing a policy in dealing with terrorism for the Caribbean. And this hopefully would be ratified by the heads of government in due course. And I would have one of the panelists deal with that, because this would have serious implications across the Caribbean for all the persons representing the different countries here as Muslims. And we need to be aware of what will be happening down the road. I don't know how many of you all are aware that that is the plan and what would be happening. They have agreed already that they would follow the Trinidad model on their terror bill and their policy accordingly. Also, the TNT government level is at government level is in process of formulating a plan to deal with returning foreign terrorist fighters, of which we are all too familiar. And we will also touch on that. And we have the panel who would each give a 10-minute analysis, and then we would have a Q&A session, which we hope you will take part vigorously and get clarification on all the different aspects of this situation. So I would now ask my brother Mtima to give us the first presentation.
Assalamu alaikum. Just now, we're not thing, right? We're not near. So I'll be coordinated, but I'll see here on the slides. So bear with us if you have any slide delays. So as mentioned, the topic is preventing violent extremism. Those who believe fight in the cause of Allah, and those who reject faith fight in the cause of evil. So fight ye against the friends of Satan. Feeble indeed is the cunning of Satan. Chapter 4, verse 76. And I'm not a scholar of Islam here, but I've heard many brothers use this as a justification for certain acts that involve violence. Go ahead, sir. So, what is violent extremism? We have been hearing this term bandying about, right? And I was on a website last night, the FBI website. Now I was very cautious, but I went on the website, right? And they said that it is encouraging, condoning, justifying. You got some problems here, and I'll take him at 10 minutes. Justifying or supporting the commission of a violent act to achieve political, ideological, religious, social, or economic goals. And the only thing I like about the website is very informative. And what I liked about the website, they had white supremacy as a form of violent extremism. I said, yeah, that is true. And I know we could agree with that. Right? So you could click to go forward. So we have to look at some pull and push factors. We have been hearing that people going for money. We've been hearing poverty. We hear new Muslims. We heard gangsters, uneducated, ex-prisoners, reverts, right? These are some of the points that the website had up, the FBI website: propaganda, distorted principles, blame, groupthink, and symbols. Press again. So we exit out that, right? Because I have not seen evidence, I don't know if anybody has seen evidence to support this. We're moving forward. According to the former ambassador, he said they quoted saying that we had the greatest numbers per capita joining ISIS. And according to the former Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for the Western Hemispheric Affairs, Juan Gonzalez, stated that the bulk of the Islamic fighters are from Trinidad and Tobago, and felt that the numbers underscore the potential for lone wolf attacks in the region, according to the New York Times. So you want to look at propaganda. According to the website, they said that violent extremists often use propaganda, right? And to try and keep it in my 10 minutes, I identify 4 areas that we know we are being faced a challenge. One is Sheikh Google, right? And we all know who Sheikh Google is. Do we know who Sheikh Google is? Just Google it, right? Everything on social media is true. I don't know why we believe that, right? WhatsApp don't lie. I don't know why they be having discussions. Why people spreading these information, you know, a storm coming, a tsunami coming, and people sharing that. So they believe that on WhatsApp. So apparently whatever is on WhatsApp is true. And it's on YouTube. So these are some of the challenges that we are being faced with. Young persons are being faced with, probably even older persons, right? And these are the propaganda that is being used to lure people into whatever type of violent behavior or extreme behavior that they want to propagate. Good. What you reach right about there? Right. Sorry. This verse here, I want to give you an anecdote on this. Some years ago, a young man was smoking a joint, a marijuana cigarette, and he had the Quran open on this verse. And he's telling me, Emtima, I never know this verse so serious. And this was his interpretation, that the Muslims should go into an area in East Port of Spain called Mova, kill the then gang leader, a guy called Bill, he dead already, so I can call him name. Kill Bill and take over the underworld. And he got that from this verse. He got that from this verse. Intoxicated, misinterpreting the ayat, right? And very dangerous. If he could get that from this verse, well. So we want to look at some distorted principles. And we all would probably be familiar with this photo with the guy talking. You have seen it on television. He's saying that, you know, I and my family cannot live in Trinidad and Tobago. We don't even speak like that. Right? So that perception of how you see yourself is also distorted. And what it's saying, they are driven by twisted beliefs and values or ideologies that are tied to political, religious, economic, and social goals. Right? So, these distorted principles are adding to a lot of the problems we are being faced with locally, regionally, and internationally. Yeah. Blame. According to the website, groups and individuals often appear in communities struggling with social and political issues. Rather than improving these situations or their own lives through constructive actions, they place blame on other person or group and then use violence as a solution. I have always been marveled by these images on Google again, right? Social media. And I've been asking myself, I wonder if these people are really Muslims to be having a placard with those statements, right? So if this is how we choose to deal with issues, when we have been advised differently in the Quran, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was sending Musa to Pharaoh, he said what? Use kind words. Are we saying 9/11 beginning of the end of democracy? Jihad against USA is our religious duty. That is our religious duty. I'm not sure if these guys are Muslims or not, but this is what they're representing. This is how they're portraying themselves, representing us with these narratives. And groupthink, right? And they say again, how they operate is that you have in some cases, a very charismatic leader, and you feel that you shouldn't ask a question. You know, I'm really proud to be standing here and having my Amir on that side there, and they always encourage us to think, ask questions. Muslims don't follow blindly, right? And we go back to Sheikh Google again. Look at the nur in his face. Look at the screen glowing, you know? And if we don't have a people who are thinking, we'll have a lot of problems in the Muslim community. And it is easy to get caught up in any kind of acts of violence or any kind of acts of extremism. And we all know symbols. Symbols are very, very important to mankind, right? And we know that symbols have no place in Islam. We don't deal with colors and moon and star, right? But we know some people get caught up in these symbols of, you know, so on every mosque have a moon and star. If your mosque not green and white, it's not a mosque, it's something else. You know? Islam has no colors, Islam has no symbols, right? But people get caught up in that symbol and those things, and that's what drives a lot of people, right? So much time saying up, I think the last one. Time is up. It's go ting 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 ting. Assalamu alaikum. Acceptance.
So MD thought we gave time by haphazardly, but we know what we were doing. I'll now ask Brother Dawood Abdullah to give us his take on the issue.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I want to begin by revisiting the definition which Brother Amtia took from the FBI, I think, website. And it's not a verbatim recollection, but it goes something like this. The use, encouragement, and support of violence for political means, political ends. And I want to take you back to 2004 to Western Iraq, the city of Fallujah, a city overwhelmingly Muslim, many minarets, known as the city of minarets. That city was carpet bombed, heavy artillery for weeks by the Americans. And I was in Iraq at the time. And when I went back to London, I sat with an official from the government, on a panel. And in the course of the discussion, he was saying to someone, don't worry, they're all terrorists. They're all terrorists, all Muslims. What's these effects? Now, Yani, what they were doing in Fallujah, wasn't it the use of violence, extreme violence, for political gain? It was. It was the use of violence, and you see the indiscriminate bombing, whatever the cause, whatever the reason, there are rules in war. There are rules. Now, my purpose of going to Iraq at the time was to help on a goodwill mission to seek the release of a British hostage, Kenneth Bigley. He was taken to Western Iraq. And during the process of dealing with the hostage takers, they said, well, tell the British government, the authorities, that they have our women in prisons in Baghdad who are being abused. Give us back our women, and we will give you back your hostage. And this was facilitated by the Foreign Office. So we said to, the officials in the Foreign Office, this is the demand. They said, no, we don't have women in prisons in Baghdad. I said, okay, send in the Red Cross, the International Red Cross, to verify the truth of what you're saying. They refused. So in the end, the guy was killed. Yani, I'm revisiting this episode to show you how, this cycle of violence and extreme, brutal. I mean, what happened in Iraq is a classic case, a case study to understand how political violence goes to those extremes. Yani, what happened in Abu Ghraib prison, the humiliation of prisoners. You saw the images, the world saw it. In fact, the soldiers who conducted those abuses in Abu Ghraib were dismissed, some of them were tried. Yani, there is no single cause. And I warn, if we really want to solve this problem of extremism, violent extremism, we have to go to the cause. Let's not beat about the bush about it. Let's not, be diplomatic to the sense that we deny truths. In the United Kingdom and across Europe and in the West, we have a reductionist view that is the evil ideology. The evil ideology is responsible for everything. And that's not the case. There are multiplicity of factors, that are responsible for this. And let's deconstruct them one by one. And then we will be on the path to resolving it. Yani, there is a word in Arabic, mujamala. We flatter people. We say things that they want to hear. And the problem remains unsolved. Violent extremism did not come about in a vacuum, out of thin air. Yani, some of us who are old enough would remember the whole thing about the Takfiris from Egypt. It started in a modern sense. Egypt was the, let's say, the incubator of the whole thing. The torture of people in Egyptian prisons. When they came out, they said, somebody was talking about Zainab al-Ghazali today. When they came out of those prisons, Sadat's and Nasser's prisons, they said that no Muslim could do that to a fellow Muslim. So what? Then they started to, they declared them non-Muslim and they fought again. I'm not justifying it, brothers and sisters. I'm explaining it. I'm explaining how we can go about dealing with this. So the problem is that if you look at the history of how it developed in the last 30, 40 years, every group is more extreme, more violent than its predecessor. Everyone is, when we had Al-Qaeda, then we had the group in Baghdad, Abu Musab al-Zarqawi, who was beheading people. We thought bin Laden was bad. And the guy in Baghdad came up. He was gone. Now we have ISIS. And so we have to look at the real causes of this thing and be true to ourselves, as to what can be done to eliminate the drivers, the real drivers of this. Political marginalization may be a factor to consider. Brutal dictatorships, denial of people. In some European countries today, you can't discuss certain subjects. If you discuss certain subjects, you are an extremist. You can't discuss Zionism. There are efforts in Europe today to declare Zionism, and if you are against Zionism, you are an anti-Semite. Intellectually, it doesn't make sense. Zionism is an ideology, a political ideology, a colonial project. So they shut down debates on campuses in Europe. And they try to create laws to prevent people from discussing these things. And so you make the space, the space for debate, for political participation narrow. And you set the young people on a course, because if you can't discuss it on campus, where can you discuss it? The campus is a place where you have to discuss these things. So in England, the lecturers, the university lecturers said to the Blair government, we are not police. We are not taught police to police people's thoughts. We are not here for this. Don't try to turn us into spies on students. You see, so that's one aspect of it. As I mentioned, the humiliation, and in England also, the first incident, the one in 2005, the ringleader was a guy called, and he was born in England, Siddiq Khan. He was born in England, so it's not like homegrown, as they say. But the guy left a video. He left a video, and as evidence. And he said, I'm doing this because of what you had done to fellow Muslims. Right or wrong? You can't do that. Two wrongs don't make a right. But this is what he said. This is the rationale, the reason why he did it. And a lot of them who do these things, some of them, they leave videos, they leave recordings, they leave their footprints. And every time it comes up, they're saying, well, this is related to what you did in Iraq, this is what you did in that, and so on. So, either we deny it, we put on blinkers, we bury our heads in the sand like ostrich, or we say, maybe something is wrong in this policy. Maybe we need to address it. Of course, some may be petty criminals. The most recent, the series of attacks recently in Europe were carried out by petty criminals. People who went to the nightclubs, others drugs, etc., and so on. It's not that they're all influenced by the evil ideology, as Mr. Blair used to say. You know. So to prevent it, let's say, there must be research. The policy must be based on data. The policy must not be based on hype and propaganda. You know, but let's research it and get the facts. Yani, what drove this Holland? What drove this group in Paris? What drove this young man on Westminster Bridge? It's not the same. There are various factors at work here, and we have to be scientific in trying to, you know, deconstruct and to treat it. You know, what they try to tell us, well, you know, this is a cultural problem. Only you Muslims are prone to violence. And what I told you about these guys who did in Fallujah is violence, it's extreme violence. So, in a nutshell, brother is coming, in a nutshell, it's a political issue too. There's politics involved. And to say to us that it's a cultural problem, you Muslims have, you always violent, your book, you know, has, encourages violence. I think, that is a simplistic interpretation of what is happening. Sorry. Thanks.
So we have had two presentations on PVE, and we looked at several different causes for people reacting. And as I said in my thing, I gave 3 different instances. So as Dr. Dawood said, it is not a simple case, and therefore it requires research in every jurisdiction, because every jurisdiction has different push and pull factors, and this is what is going on throughout the world, and this is why the different organizations are helping in doing the research to determine what are those push and pull factors, to be able to determine what are the remedial actions to be applied. And I think what we want to generate by this discussion is for all of us to start thinking about our own environment and understand what are those push and pull factors that generate that violent extremism view, or a person who might dislike something, going from disliking it and doing something positive about it, and going instead to do something negative about it. I would like to, we have our next panelist give his contribution, and I have asked him to deal with the question of the coming legislation and policy on the Caribbean and in Trinidad in respect of terrorism and returning fighters.
Assalamu alaikum, good night. Thank you very much for having me. Brother Hafiz was trying very vigorously to reach me during the course of last week, and we only connected towards the end of the week. We were not able to coordinate, so unfortunately I didn't come here expecting to make a presentation, but fortunately the speakers who have gone before me have done a very good job of laying the groundwork for the topic. The reality is that this topic is a very complicated one. There is no simple solution, and I think starting with Brother Hafiz, I think he laid it out very nicely. Certain elements in the world tend to, for one reason or the other, focus on one aspect of the whole gamut of violent extremism. But violent extremism is not restricted to a religious cause or any particular religious cause. Violent extremism captures extremism for any religious, ideological, or political reason. And when we look at the legislative approach that has been taken by Trinidad and Tobago, for example, which is a model that has been followed throughout the Caribbean. The legislation speaks to religious, ideological, political, or any other grounding for violent expression. So the legislation itself does not focus on religious extremism or extremism of a particular religion. However, there is no denying that the climate of the world right now and the direction of conversation as led by many people with specific interests focuses on the issue of religious extremism and Islamic extremism. And I don't like the term Islamic extremism, to be quite frank. Trinidad and Tobago is a culture that is made up of many different religions. My grandfather was Hindu, my grandmother was Muslim. I am a Christian. I'll give you an example of how it affects all of us. In Trinidad and Tobago, there is a phenomenon where families or extended families raise children. And in my house, we raised the son of one of my cousins who was Muslim. And my mother and my sister were taking that child to the United States to visit his mother. And they were pulled from the line by the Customs and Border Protection and taken to a back room. And when the senior officer came in, he couldn't stop laughing. They were pulled from the line because the child bore the same name as someone on the terrorist watch list, but the child was 4 years old. And that is the reality that we all face if we do not deal with this. And that is the most subtle or simplest form of the reality. The more extreme form of the reality is when the violence reaches home, or the violence reaches people that we love, people that we care about. And we, as human beings, as decent human beings, and as my understanding of Islam, people, we care about our neighbors and we care about our friends. So it is incumbent upon us to do what we can to address this. Now, the brothers spoke about, in essence, freedom of thought. And the legislation as it stands right now does not restrict the freedom of thought. There is a constitutional provision that allows for the freedom of thought in Trinidad and Tobago and many of the Caribbean jurisdictions, which I think mirror the same provisions. And there's constitutional protection for the freedom of expression, but with some limits. One cannot inveigle people to attack other people, whether it is for any reason whatsoever. And that is where the restrictions come in. Of course, you have the freedom of movement and you have the freedom to act. But when your constitutional rights start to impact on the constitutional rights of others, that is where the law must strike a balance. Now, the striking of that balance is a tricky thing. And when we deal with issues of, and we'll call it terrorism, the starting point has to be to protect. And then we take a step back from there. So the Anti-Terrorism Act of Trinidad and Tobago draws that line in the sand, where we basically say that we criminalize certain acts in terms of causing harm to others. And I don't want to go into the mechanics of legislation, but I'm prepared to answer any questions that you have. It places certain restrictions in terms of expression, in that it criminalizes inveigling others to commit terrorist acts. But it doesn't spell out exactly all the details of that, because it's shifting sand. What we may define as terrorism today may not be defined as terrorism tomorrow, and that is why we rely on the courts to provide interpretations in the context of the world that we live in. But the criminal sanctions are not the only mechanisms that we have in the legislation. We also have financial sanctions in the legislation, and that is a more softer approach. So the financial sanctions basically are aimed at two things. One, depriving the terrorist of the means of committing a terrorist act. And two, providing some measure of a stick that doesn't involve incarceration or any other type of criminal sanction, to allow the state a mechanism by which you can guide people back onto the right path. So those are two of the key mechanisms that are in our legislation. Now, Brother Hafiz spoke about the CARICOM approach And he spoke about the work that's being done by CARICOM Impacts. And essentially what CARICOM Impacts is doing is to prepare a Caribbean counterterrorism strategy. And basically it's multi-pronged, and it somewhat mirrors the counterterrorism strategy that has been contemplated in Trinidad and Tobago and other jurisdictions. So basically what you have to do is look at the problem from the beginning to the end. Look at means by which you can prevent persons who may be vulnerable to extremist ideologies from falling prey to that. Dealing with people who would have already signed on to those ideologies and determining what is the best approach to bring them back. And dealing with people who have committed acts of terrorism in pursuance of those types of ideologies and seeing what is the best approach. At the end of the day, we as a society want to bring people back into the folds of society. There may be circumstances where some people are just too far gone, and that's the reality of it. And that is not something that is restricted to terrorism. That is something that really deals with criminality. So if you have a criminal, for example, who has gone down that life of crime, some people may be rehabilitated, and some people may be too far gone for us to rehabilitate. And that is a decision that has to be made by someone who is way more qualified than I am to talk on that topic. The direction that the government of Trinidad and Tobago is going in, and this is of it, is that we are looking to address the entire problem. The legislation as it stands right now already criminalizes certain acts of terrorism, already imposes some of those financial sanctions. There is currently a bill that was before the Parliament which was intended to strengthen that, taking into account some of our international obligations, but also taking into account the experiences that we as a country have had over the last few years, particularly with this developing phenomenon of foreign terrorist fighters. And let us make no mistake, regardless of whatever the statistic is, people have left our shores and have ventured to foreign lands to take up another cause. Now, I don't want to get into whether it is they are right or wrong to do that. However, we have to look at the impacts of the fact that they have gone on our society, as well as the impacts of their returning. And that is the risks that are posed to all of us. We also have to look at ways of preventing people from going further, from leaving our shores and going if they have not gone as yet. But the brothers who have spoken before me have made a very valid point. We have to get down to the root of why they're going. And I cannot say that we have a clear understanding of the why they have gone. And that is why it was important for us to draw a line in the sand now to say, okay, until we have understood that, there are certain steps that we must take to prevent people from going and to have a mechanism to treat with those who have gone and treat with those who have returned. However, that is not where it must end. We must understand the problem so that we as a society can find a solution, and not just a Trinidad society, but a Caribbean society. Because we are far too interrelated, intermingled for us to think that Trinidad stands alone, or Barbados or Jamaica stands alone. So, again, I hope I have given enough food for thought. I am prepared to answer any questions you may have. I hope I was within my 10 minutes. Yes, thank you.
All right, so we have covered the whole spectrum of those issues, and it is for you now to determine where there are gaps and ask the questions, so the gentleman here will help deal with it. So we are open for questions. I think we have a mic. Is there a mic anywhere? That one is working? Is that one working? As if this one is on? Just talk on that. Yes, brother, go ahead.
If I may, the gentleman from the US, can I?
Go ahead.
I never thought in a lifetime that I'd be able to speak with somebody from the US. I have two questions. As a Muslim, and I'm sure that this issue is burning in everybody's heart here as Muslims. I recently visited I thank Allah for the opportunity. It was a bittersweet experience to visit Palestine. It's a name that Google slowly is taking out of the vocabulary. Please tell me the UN position on the Palestinian situation. And two, if you can explain to us weapons of mass destruction, because the UN has never stated a position on weapons of mass destruction. I want to hear that from you, sir, please.
All right. I will not entertain that question right now. But we're dealing with the question of violent extremism and the two bills that will impact upon the Caribbean region more than. Next question. Walaikum salam.
Good evening to those of our visitors. Let me first of all say that this is an excellent topic to be discussing. I want to suggest that this is the type of topic that needs to be discussed in our Muslim communities throughout the region. We tend to sweep it under the carpet, we tend not to discuss it, we tend to turn a blind eye to it. I think our communities throughout the region need to start discussing this type of topic, so let me come back to you on that. Secondly, I think that Dr. Dawood made a relevant point that in the absence of justice, people will seek all sorts of means to get there, and that is common in crime, criminal and violent behavior, and also in extremism. I think that is important. Thirdly, I want to suggest, so oftentimes, I want to get feedback on this, oftentimes Muslims are accused of not saying enough in response to terrorist activities. You're often said, oh, Muslims don't condemn it enough. I know that we do, but this is something that's oftentimes thrown at us. How do we respond to this? Should we respond to it? Should we say more? Do we need to say more about terrorism and that sort of stuff across the world? One of the things that we have done in Barbados in response is that we are talking to groups of people. We had a group of Christian communities. We sat with them and we went to the whole gamut of what Islam says on this. That helped to solve some of the misconceptions that are occurring. I think these discussions need to take place between Muslims and non-Muslims, between communities and people. But how do we respond to the constant denials that we are not responding enough?
All right. From the standpoint of being the coordinator of the Muslim Roundtable in Trinidad, representing about 25 major organizations and NGOs, I can say that we have started to address that problem. There are several factors we're doing. If you recall, yesterday we had the faith-based dinner, and that is one area that we've been working with to be able to reach out to our different publics that the Muslim community interacts with, so we could really let them know who we are, what our views are, and they live with us. So when the time comes, they would be the ones to defend us. Also, we have been meeting with a member of the AG staff is here. We met with them and dealt with these issues. Ministry of National Security, same thing. We reached out to the different, both the diplomatic corps in Trinidad and Tobago to let them know also. So we are starting to do that kind of thing when there are situations that needs to be condemned, whether it's done by Muslims or non-Muslims, we are starting to do it. So just like you in Barbados, we're doing the same work here. And this is what we need to be doing, and I would like to implore all the members of the different Caribbean islands here to start doing that when you get back home. Next question. You have one right here.
Just a couple points. Number one, the way of the topic is structured, though, our concern should be with violent extremism. As though non-violent extremism is all right. Let's check out the that who are those who are extremists, whether they are non-violent or violent. Both are condemned. part, the balance part, what is the between truth and falsehood. So, violent extremism, we are asked to condemn Muslim violent extremism. And we all jump on the bandwagon and we condemn it. But when non-Muslims are guilty of violent extremism, the same who ask us to condemn Muslim violent extremism don't condemn what is done by non-Muslims, whether Christians or otherwise. So they need to be balanced in terms of condemning extremism in what is form. It doesn't matter who does it, whether it is Muslim or non-Muslim. The anti-terrorism bill, what it may appear to be neutral, it targets the Muslims. The word is structured, would have been against what Muslims, because Muslims are the ones who look at being stupid. Like a red bill, anti-Parliament, any simple-minded person, any thinking could consider it fair to what primarily Muslims first and those whom they want to target thereafter. So my points are, we need to all stand up as a nation and condemn all forms of extremism done by whoever it is, Muslim or non-Muslim. And to the people who want us to condemn violent Muslim extremism on the Muslim part, need to condemn their own people, whether it is US, UK, France, Britain, whatever it is, they need to condemn their own nation violent extremism. Yes, we have nobody before. We look at 2,100 bomb in Afghanistan, 10th nation. What's that? That is also a symbol of violent extremism. In addition, I would like all of us who are Muslims that we are told that we understand for justice. Whether we do it, whether it's done by us as Muslims or done by non-Muslims, and I even gather all the people to do the same. So we Muslims should galvanize every single support, every individual person who stands for justice. And yes, I do agree for the Dawood. The half of the people, more than half, 50%, 80% of those who are fighting in Syria, what they will lack understanding of the deen, they go based on emotion. The people are saddened by seeing day in, day out on the media, Muslims being destroyed, countries being ruined, set back thousands of years, and then what? Who is responsible? The Muslims? If you cheat people unjustly, they're going to retaliate likewise. It's a law of nature. If you put people on a just cause, when I get out, I'm going to retaliate likewise. So in order for extremism come to an end, the biggest perpetrators are governments that need to stop what they're doing on the poor Muslim countries. And when they stop that first, then extremism, violent or otherwise, is going to come to almost zero, zilch. If it continues, you will talk about now the Yom Kippur, and there's always going to be a twin group. Lastly, some of the biggest so-called extremist groups were the ones created by US, UK, France, Al-Qaeda, Taliban, you name it. They made it, they did it. I didn't say it. It's found that the people who did independent research, they have found where they find that these groups for their own interests, to sell weapons, to test new bombs. So if yes, it's complicated, yes, but one of the biggest perpetrators of violence against human beings across the globe are the biggest one to say now, violent extremism for the Muslims. I think that's another just and fair. We must just speak out, jump on somebody's bandwagon, but take a just stand and condemn everybody, nation, governments, whoever it is, who are guilty of extremist behavior and violence against human beings, not Muslim, human beings as a whole.
Not to respond directly to Aliasa, I just want to give this anecdote. About 3 weeks ago, National Geographic was here, or 2 weeks ago probably, doing a research or a documentary on Muslims. And I had the privilege of moving around with them. And we were at the Beetham Gardens in East Port of Spain area. And the US Embassy decided that they want IATF, Interagency Task Force, to accompany them because the Monday prior, we were at Fort Picton in Laventille, and the former ambassador was there, Estrada, and just before we left, we heard some shots, some gunshots, probably down in Eastern Quarry. Right? We had police with us, but they wanted to ensure that they send police from IATF, Interagency Task Force. So the team of National Geographic staff were there, and there was this young police speaking with them. But the way he was gesticulating, I tell myself, something taking place there. So I walked up, right, and he turned around to me, and as he opened his mouth, this is an active police officer with an automatic weapon strapped across him. As he opened his mouth, I smelled alcohol. And then he proceeded a continuous conversation. And this was his conversation. People talking about the Muslim and the Rasta in war. The Rasta is not the problem. It's the Muslim is the problem. Because he said we, meaning the TTPS, we and the Rasta is one. And we warring the Muslims. It's we warring the Muslims. And he started to point in my face and said, tell my liner, tell my liner. And I just stood there watching him. And I said, I'm listening. And when I couldn't take any more, I walked off. And I went into the police post. And I asked the inspector, I said, can I speak freely? I wouldn't share what the freely I spoke with him. But I asked him, I said, can I speak freely? He said, no problem. And I said, I do not want this officer on any escort with us. And number two, my life is at risk with him. This is a police officer saying that he and quote unquote, a local gang is one and the war in the Muslims. So, and as somebody is saying, Brother Ali Hassan, it is real. Right? My thing is, my response is not to kill that police, he need help. We have an alcohol problem, you have a drinking problem, right? They were going to fire him, and I told the inspector, right? Well, going to dismiss him, I told the inspector, I said, listen, where is he more dangerous? On the streets, or as an active police? I said, he need treatment than sending him home on suspension or whatever, because if he don't want to kill Muslim already, outside he's more dangerous, I think, right? So we know how we're supposed to behave, right? And I don't want us to, I don't want us to, I told some person from the US Embassy, we cannot demonize the term caliphate, and we cannot demonize the term Islamic State, right? Don't let me get into that and try to demonize the word caliphate and the word Islamic State. Right? I told some young men, eventually I found out they went out, I said, listen to me. I have no problem with an Islamic State. But if they establish an Islamic State, you're operating like how Israel and others operating, I want no part of that, because that is not our culture. That is not our culture. Right? Of using violence, right, in that manner, to bring about peace. I don't think I say anything wrong here. People more learn than me here. If that is our culture, our way, then tell me I'm saying something wrong. Right? So I don't want us to demonize the term caliphate. I'm afraid to say caliphate, I'm afraid to say Islamic State. It's the behavior we want to address that's taking place now.
Let me just add that there are numerous hadith of the Prophet that shows his approach to those who attacked him. And it certainly was not trying to do the same to them. So as Muslims, even if we are emotional, we need to understand what our faith is and what our faith teaches us. And trying to fight violence with violence was never the practice of the Prophet ﷺ. So, as much as we would dislike what is happening, we have to show that our teachings are better than those who perpetrate violence. And therefore, that is the road that we're supposed to be taking. So, we have to first of all understand our Islam. And I think 2 nights ago, I think Dr. Tutunji was alluding to that approach to things, that we have to be always Muslim. We cannot be Muslim when everything going good, and then when things start to go bad and we're under pressure, we're not Muslim again. We have to be able to deal with our principles that makes us Muslim at all times. And therefore, when we talk about prevention of violent extremism, and if you recall, the 3 examples I gave was last week the 13-year-old boy whose neck was slit and the 57-year-old woman whose neck was slit. That happened right here in Trinidad. It didn't happen in Iraq under war conditions. It happened right here in Trinidad last week. What is that? If we adopt the approach that, all right, that is not justice, so we will take, what will happen? And then again, violence in school. We see that on an everyday basis. What about domestic violence? Man beating up women. That doesn't happen in a Muslim home. We need to understand what we're talking about. To be emotional about issues is one thing. To understand our religion and what principles we ought to be living by is a different thing. So what we were trying to do here is bring what is the reality. If we start to teach our children and teach our own people about how do we prevent our children and our members of our Jamaat to deal and prevent violence, turn into violence, then we would not have the problem. We will learn to be more creative. We learn to be more critical thinkers, and therefore apply those strategies in dealing with situations that confront us. That is how we need to approach situations. Not trying to justify that somebody killed the Muslim somewhere, so we need to kill them too. What kind of attitude is that as a Muslim? We need to, the first thing that the Prophet ﷺ did with his Sahabas was what? Teach them critical thinking. Because he knows what he wants to ensure that the revelations he got, what he wants to spread it after he was gone. That is what we need to start teaching our Muslim people. Critical thinking. Because what we do now is react by emotion and by anger. Emotion and anger nullifies the brain. We have to start reverting to our brain, our intellect that God gave us, that made us different from animals. It's our intellect. So, my brothers and sisters, we have a history of that. When the Denmark, what do you call it? Cartoons. What happened? That happened in Denmark. There were people all over the Middle East killing one another, Muslims killing one another in rioting. Is that the way we were taught to behave? So let us try to teach ourselves to react with intelligence, with intellect. My brother. Okay.
I want to share experience. Topic violent extremism. Because extremism goes before violence. People become extreme in their beliefs, then violence comes. And on the 2 lectures that Mujawar and the Representative Guiana mentioned, political mechanisms to leaders, whether it is economic, social, legal, rule of law, and others, within the Muslim countries, and how Muslims are being treated. And let us ask Dr. Ramadan mention all that. ignorant followers,
That's right.
they use it and manipulate it and turn it into something very dangerous. I went to the university and I was born in the good principle brotherhood that instituted by members of the organization in the university. And from there, talking about the politics of the African Muslims there. I was really forward Islamic education, that is it. It's not to Quran, that's what I'm but then that particular dimension of all this happening was absent in my mind. And little by little, start to books. And we have a charismatic leader that speaks so eloquently and points out the problems of the society and we need to, and then try to connect it with Islam. And we start to read books. And the books, you read very selective topics. Topics that do not deal with what we want, we don't want to hear, we want to read. From the same author, book milestones, by Sefer, we have specific topics that we read. And others belong to get nothing about it. And from there, we form our own opinions, we add individuals, add into it, and then the followers pushing the leadership to do things that they may not want to do it back. They may not give them on their own. They will not take that decision. But because they are accused of being who bring this, you say we should do that. That is, for example, why are you now developing? Fulfill. Let's go. So, lack of education. And what happened? We end up, some of us went to university. And I was one of those who went. What happened? We decided some of us in the last day. We went to Sudan. And in the Sudan, anybody that got in our opinion went to the Sudan, they are not scholars. These people, they are really part of the system. They are part of the system. You have to listen. Block opinions. But gradually, with knowledge, Islamic knowledge, start to open up our minds. And then we say, that's not the argument. There's a good thing about Yusuf Fandari. Islamic violence between rejection and extremism. We started to that put us back completely and simply. That's not the argument. And we continue to learn. And alhamdulillah, that completely took us away from extremism. Knowledge is Islamic knowledge is fundamental. A lot of people in that. Even most of the leaders of Al-Qaeda and together actually was Islamic knowledge. They are self-taught. Our leader was self-taught because he was a graduate of economics and have just basic Islamic knowledge. Probably elementary Islamic knowledge. We call it, he was our leader, he was our spiritual leader, our educational leader. People that have knowledge of graduating from years of Islamic without discipline.
Thank you, brother.
So, please.
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam.
Brother here, again, about that story about the police. I didn't have to say anything, but it really trapped something inside me. Is it Mr. Dalit?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so you work in the office of the AG. Are you a citizen?
Yes, sir.
Okay, are you a public servant or a political appointment?
I'm not a political appointment, but I have a public servant right in school and contract post as well.
So you're a public servant?
Yes, I am.
Okay. My suggestion to the government, because I'm speaking in a very violent context. We have spoken a lot about Islam and so forth. I don't want to go there at this point in time. One of the people that we spoken about. Have you ever heard of an organization that exists called the Red Brigade?
Red Brigade.
The Red Brigade.
In Spain or here?
You ever heard of that? Yes, no? Okay.
Yes.
The Red Brigade was a terrorist organization that existed in Italy and did a lot of terrorism in Germany and so forth in the 1960s and 70s. Have you ever heard of the Ariel Sharon cult? In Japan, when this guy released sarin gas So, my argument here is that while it is that this is taking place in the world today, it isn't limited to Islam. But there is something I need to point out to you. My suggestion is that you and your colleagues at the AG's office do have a strong case study about 1990. Because looking at the Muslim community is not the only answer. You can look at customs and excise. Especially when the guns came in 1990, came in like a failure of our system. 1990 touched me because I worked opposite TTT at First Citizens Bank. I saw everything live and direct. I found looking at you. How did these guns come in? Undetected. We had 3 years ago a story about some high-powered guns stolen from the forensic center. Those guns were used against police in the Martin. I don't think people who hold these guns are Muslims, but they are dangerous because you have these high-powered guns. A case was made by a former Minister of National Security for armored vehicles, and the politicians behaved very stupidly about it and spread us a dead wrong propaganda on social media. Then, I wasn't going to say this, but when the team talked about the behavior of that policeman, I do not believe that the systems they have in place to look at customs, the immigration, and police is sufficient. That institutional failure is going to make this country a greater chance of becoming a free state, because the crime situation is bad. Only 9. I'm not insult anybody's intelligence in this room, because that is a fact. Now I want to touch on a second point. So I ask you please consider that. You have the police systems in place to monitor these people. They're no longer trusted in this society. The second point that I'm going to wrap up right now is going to see with social media and the restriction of what people are saying. Now, I'm sorry that you have to be the brunt of it. I am very sorry. But I really think that your DPP's office, and to some extent the AG's office and the police service really sucks. And let me explain what I mean. Justice Frank C. Passad made a pronouncement. He made a judgment. I'm not going to get to the merits and the merits of it. But I saw people make remarks on social media that you people didn't take any action against it. We had a Muslim boy from Rio Cabo made a reference. Maybe he should, I didn't think he directly affect the Prime Minister. I'm not going to get to the laws of it, but he was arrested. I saw his brother on TV taking a picture, wearing hijab. I am waiting for your office. I'm waiting for the police to deem him a terrorist. That was the start of honestness in Trinidad, because you did not take any action. I don't mean you per se, but no action was taken against those people, which is bordering contempt of court for criticizing those judges. And saying that the judge make a statement. So, if before you put a law in the books, this country suffers from strong institutional failure. Institutions that have to protect the rights of people, whether they are Muslim or non-Muslim. Please consider that, because nothing you put in place will, if that is the standard.
Thank you very much. And I really appreciate you saying what you said. Now, I take all those things very personally. I'll tell you why. My colleague introduced me as Andrew Dalip Jr. First of all, there's an Andrew Dalip Sr., who was commanding officer of the regiment up until the time of retirement. But in 1990, he wasn't. And I lived through that as a 15-year-old boy. I lived through it when they attempted to kill him. I lived through it when they actually shot him, and I had his blood on my hands. There's also an Andrew Dalip III, my 6-year-old son. And everything that I do is for him. If we don't do something now, all of us here, and all of us in this country, then he will have to fight the fight that is my responsibility to fight. And I make no apologies about it for saying that. And you are right, we have institutional failures. The brother who spoke across here, I'm sorry sir, I don't remember your name, made an excellent point. That he said the Muslim community needs to speak out, but the truth of the matter is we all need to speak out. And that is a problem that we have as a society, where we sit back and we say nothing. There is a lot of focus on the Muslim community. Yes, you can't deny that. And the brother is right that Muslims who need to speak out to make your voices heard, because I am a strong believer that the loudest voices do not represent the majority. But the reason why the loudest voices are the loudest is because the rest of us do not speak. So we all need to take back our country. We all need to take back our society. And we're not just taking it back from the criminals or those who we label as criminals, but those who have criminalistic tendencies, whether it is within the police service, the defense force, custom, excise, the Attorney General's office, the DPP's office. Not that I'm saying that they are criminals in the AG's office, the customs, the police, because I work with all these people. We do have constitutional boundaries in terms of what the Attorney General's office can influence, whether it is in the police service, the judiciary, the customs and excise and whatnot. But yes, you are quite correct. These are things that need to change. And advocacy by the community is going to help. And I will confess to you that this is something that we are grappling with in terms of finding solutions. The AG's office is responsible for drafting legislation and is responsible for taking civil action. And yes, we are responsible for taking civil action with respect to terrorism. I cannot say to you that there is any circumstances under which that young man who is in question would fall within the confines of the Anti-Terrorism Act. So I don't know if I can address your fears that way. Again, the Anti-Terrorism Act deals with very specific things. And how that young man's case unfolds, we will all wait to see. And this is me speaking as an individual, not speaking on behalf of the Attorney General's office. But the point is that we all have to stand up and take back our country. And yes, dealing with the national security infrastructure is very, very important. But that comes from the society. It comes from civic-minded people like your good selves standing up and dealing with specific problems. So yes, this is great that we are all here tonight to try and find a solution to a very topical issue. But you also have a great opportunity here to be a catalyst for the rest of society and show exactly how we can take back our country from those with criminalistic tendencies and those who have taken a criminal path for whatever reason. Now, the brother across here spoke about the difference between violent extremism and extremism. And I am not qualified to speak on Islam. But I am learning as much as I am sharing. The reason that we have our constitutional framework the way it is that we have people of different beliefs, different creeds and races. So you have in our beautiful society, Muslims, Hindus, Christians, and other religions. And the tenets of those religions may be somewhat different to the tenets of Islam. But the importance is that we respect each other's views. We respect each other's rights to practice religion in the way that we choose to practice religion. But they must strike that boundary. So it is not for us to say what Muslims must think. Whether Muslims deem the way that another Muslim thinks as extreme, it's not up to us to say. However, it is how that is expressed, how one's views are expressed, that is where the law must draw the line. So if it is in holding a particular view, you decide that, and I'm not saying you, but a person decides that he must impose those views on someone else by force, well, that is where the rest of us must step in. And I will make the point that I think Hafiz made, that while the world media tends to focus on things that happen in the homes of those world media organizations, the fact of the matter is, terrorist attacks that have taken place in places like Europe or the Western world are minuscule in comparison to the terrorist acts that take place on a daily basis in the Islamic world. So the people who suffer most right now, at this point in time in history, are Muslim people. So that is another driver for us dealing with this. I think the brother who spoke across here was quite correct that the way for us to deal with that is through education and empowerment. But married with what the brother across here spoke about, creating opportunities for us to speak out, educate the young people, educate everybody in terms of what the real issues are and what the true teachings of Islam are, if we are talking about Islamist extremism here, so that they have the correct view, they have an opportunity to hear both sides and they can choose for themselves and give them the opportunity to speak.
And in addition to that, we need to we need to really be able to come together as a society and a community to ensure that we could generate one voice and be able to deal with situations and policy in a proactive way, which we are attempting to do, and that is why we have him here. We have one question here.
January 2016, when the government was about to start in Syria, we go to the UN and followed it up with a survey. A questionnaire was sent asking what are the problems in the Arab places, what are the causes, and what are the solutions. We summarized the report. Most of it blame the UN for not doing the job and the peace impact of coordination. We sent the copy to the UN and the UN advised it's good. They didn't say it's wrong, but at the same time they said they do recognize the member states should take it up. What we would have done was pass it to our member states to follow. So,
All right, well, before you go on, you see previously somebody asked a question of the UN. The UN is not part of our discussion, and therefore I will not entertain it. I know, I agree, I will not entertain it. This gentleman asked a question here, wants to ask a question. Just pass the mic to him, please.
You can speak to the gentleman after.
If you want to have a chat with him afterwards, fine. But it's not part of our discussion. Yes, yes, sir. Or is this Farid? Yes. Wow.
I believe, or I think, that Muslims, the Muslim discussion and the Muslim narrative on this issue of violence and violent extremism, or extreme violence, or whatever we call it, oftentimes fails to recognize the essence of the problem. I often reflect on the question I have heard is a hadith that in the end times the killer will not know why he was killed, and he who is killing will not know why he is killing. And we seem to be taking this issue of violence and putting it in a political context, and we are not putting it in a philosophical context and not relating it to the principles, the Quranic principles, and are therefore unable to get to the root and the heart of the problem. We forget the story of Cain and Abel. We forget what used to be a debate a few years ago, but is no longer a debate, which is the extreme violence that we find on television and in entertainment and on the internet and on Facebook and on every pervasive view that everything that pervades in our life is filled with violence. And everything about violence that is shown to us reacts to violence in exactly the way that Habil did not react to violence. Okay? When Cain said to Habil, said to Habil, I'm going to kill you, he said, I will never raise my hand to you. When the prophet said in the hadith that look, the murderer, when two Muslims fight, the one who murders and the one who is not murdered are both going to hell. And the companions asked, well, what do you mean? The murderer is going to hell? Or is the not murdered going to hell? He said the not murderer is going to hell because if he had the opportunity, he would have murdered also. And we are refusing, we are taking this as a political issue. And this is not a political issue. This is an issue that goes to the very foundation of Western civilization and a replacement of human and Islamic values by values of people who are just shaitanic in what they are feeding us and feeding our children. And I would like to see the subject turn to the discussion of those fundamental issues by Muslims when they are discussing this problem of violent extremism.
Thank you, Brother Farid, and that's an excellent point on which to finish the evening. So my brothers, we thank you all. We thank God for giving us this opportunity to deal with these issues, and we hope that we will have other opportunities to continue this debate. It's time to close, so thank you very much for staying and making your contribution. Jazakallah, Assalamu alaikum.